Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. High Point University, the premier life skills university, focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. And Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Long before our current public health crisis was made manifest, or even a far-off risk, we discussed planning this dialogue around what we are calling Rising Seas. Welcome again to the most widely watched program on Carolina business, policy, and public affairs. I am Chris William. Thank you for supporting this dialogue the last 30 years. And welcome to this very special virtual edition of Carolina Business Review. There are literally tens of thousands of miles of total coastline in North and South Carolina, including estuaries. And now we will convene a panel of experts about these bays and these beaches and these inlets and what kind of risk rising tides and rising seas posed. And we will start in just a moment.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Orrin Pilkey from Duke University, Todd Miller of the North Carolina Coastal Federation, Tom Keyes from the Carteret County Chamber, and Laura Cantrell of the Coastal Conservation League.
Welcome again to Carolina Business Review. We'd like to thank our guests and welcome our guests now to this dialogue about rising seas. First of all, Dr. Orrin Pilkey, Professor Emeritus of Earth Sciences at Duke University, Laura Cantrell, Executive Director of the Coastal Conservation League out of the Low Country, Todd Miller, Executive Director of the North Carolina Coastal Federation in North Carolina, and finally, and certainly not least, Tom Keyes, President of the Carteret County Chamber, as well as President of the Business Alliance for Protecting the Atlantic Coast. Lady, gentlemen, welcome. Dr. Pilkey, let me start with you. Is there, it seems like a sophomore question, but rather, what is the unintended advantage for the environment given what's gone on with COVID and how it's shut many things down?
Well, one of the most startling things was the discovery of, or the recognition of the Himalaya mountains that in India and Pakistan and other places. The mountains are being seen that people 20 years old or younger have never seen. And they knew they were there, but the pollution was far too great to see the mountain. But then there's also been a lot of pollution changes to the good. Less pollution in our local waters, less boating traffic, less oil spilling, and so forth. So there's in so many ways, just the reduction in our activities has made a big difference in some very important aspects of the environment.
Laura, let's go down to you. And I know there was at the beginning of this public health crisis, there was a lot of back and forth at Folly Beach. People wanted to go to the beach, and I'm using that as a proxy for a lot of beach communities here. And I know the Coastal Conservation League has much more of a broader purview. But same question, how has the unintended advantage benefited the environment?
Thanks, Chris. And I agree with Orrin that it's been remarkable to see the lessening of the human footprint on our environment as we're all staying at home and not driving in cars and not getting on airplanes. And we're seeing many of the results of that. I think it may be too soon to tell what the long-lasting effects are going to be. I'm hopeful that one of the results that will take place as we get on the other side of this crisis is that we will learn some lessons about, doing a reset about our relationship with nature. I will also say that even though those are some things that we could look to that are perhaps promising, this crisis has also given some of our leaders, particularly federal leaders, an excuse or perhaps an opportunity to lessen environmental regulations, saying that they need to give companies a break on some of the compliance due to the pandemic. And while we certainly understand that this is a crisis and human health is paramount, environmental regulations really are all about human health. So that is a concern to us.
Yeah. Okay. Tom, let me go down to Carteret County, Morehead City. There were anecdotal reports that we've heard in places like the Outer Banks, where the community, the permanent community, the year-round community down there, liked the idea that they did not have all of those visitors. While that is an important part of revenue, of course, for the Old North State, they like the fact that it's closed down. So in Morehead City, in Carteret County, along North Carolina's Gold Coast and other places, what is that debate look like among the communities, and also the advantages, the clear advantages to the environment?
Well, here, like every place else, I think there's a certain sense of fear. There's a fear of the unknown. You don't really know who may actually have COVID-19 because they might be asymptomatic. A lot of the folks that are here year-round like the fact that there aren't droves of people coming in from out of town, Raleigh, Charlotte, wherever. We have an absolutely excellent hospital, but it's not a huge hospital. It certainly has a limited amount of beds. I think they're well suited for any kind of emergency here, but they're not well suited to have a ton of folks get sick all at once. We've seen a supply chain situation, just like a lot of other places where you've got a lot of empty shelves at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And sometimes some of it doesn't make any sense. You don't know why mouthwash is completely off the shelves. I mean, who's hoarding that? So, of course, our businesses are suffering, the restaurants are suffering, tourism is a huge part of what we do here. And we would like to be up and running, but we want to do it safely. We have a lot of second homeowners who would love to be here. In some cases, they are here. We hope that they act responsibly, just like everybody else acts responsibly. It's a different kind of world. Some business was talking to me about it yesterday, and I said, look, this is my first pandemic. We're trying to feel our way along. We really don't know what we're doing at this point in time other than trying to make the best out of a bad situation.
Todd, what do you think? We're not intentionally ignoring you. Please jump in.
Well, I think, as everyone else has said, we definitely see a temporary benefit to the environment, or just the fact that we have less activity going on. But I think we all realize that that is not a sustainable solution to many of our environmental problems, and that we, it gives us an idea of what might be possible if we're more effective in controlling pollution and managing the threats. But at the same time, looking forward, there's going to be a major impact on resources available to do environmental management correctly, and land acquisition, other things that have been funded in the past, as we both see the federal and state coffers depleted substantially in terms of $2 billion budget deficit in state government here. So it's so the long-term implications are, I'm not too optimistic that the benefits we're seeing shortly will translate into a long-term gain.
Professor Pilkey, let me come back to Laura said was expressing some concern about environmental standards, and Laura, I'm probably not going to do this well, but Oren, back to the point: is there a risk of a crisis as the risk of this crisis continues to unfold? Will we cast aside those long-term environmental aspirations in pursuit of a short-term easy fix to help us feel better about the economy and our lifestyle?
Yeah, that's the short term, especially for coastal, our coast, which is mainly made up almost entirely of barrier islands, very fragile islands, very susceptible to sea level rise, and very susceptible to what's coming. We're expecting this year and this decade to have intensification of storms. That's already happening the last 3 years. And we see the ocean now in general in our area and in the Gulf of Mexico is warmer than it's ever been in recorded time. And that's going to increase that's going to give us bigger storms and wetter storms. And on top of that, of course, we have the sea level rise and intensification of storms. And we have, it's not really, this is a short range, this is a short time hazard. We may see some really big storms, not necessarily more storms, but bigger storms this year. And each of the big storms like Hurricane Harvey hitting Houston and so forth and so on is starting to sink in as to the wisdom of near shore, near coast development, and I hope that in that sense, I hope it continues to have that impact.
Laura, let me come back to you. And the Low Countries are particularly at risk because of the level. There's a reason it's called the Low Country, as you well know. Back to something that Oren had said, Professor Pilkey said in the press. He said that our beaches are doomed. And I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but does this get the dialogue that you feel like, the policy dialogue in the debate, that you feel like would be important for Charleston and the Low Country?
You know, you stole my line. I like to say they call it the Low Country for a reason, and you're exactly right. And
I'm sorry, I wasn't doing that intentionally.
Well, you know, because of our geography, we're a very porous coastal landscape. We have all these beautiful rivers and streams that dump into the ocean, our vast expanse of salt marsh, the barrier islands that Professor Pilkey was talking about. We're in many ways the canary in the coal mine for sea level rise and these increasingly intense storms and other impacts of climate change. So yes, I mean, we believe that this does need to be front and center of the policy dialogue. It is an urgent issue for our state, for North Carolina, for the entire Eastern Seaboard, frankly, for the world. The question is, what can we do about it at the local level? And there are things that we're doing at the state level and the local level that are intended to strike the best balance we can between development and environmental protection and addressing the impacts of flooding and erosion and these other impacts. You know, we're also experiencing a population boom. So that's the double whammy, changing climate and increasing development pressure. So it's not a matter of if we develop, it's how we develop, and to do that in ways that are striking the right balance.
So Todd, Tom, and like you, as Oren and Laura just described the coast, and I know you have a lot of the same feelings, this is not just about the coast. Doesn't the attribute and the makeup of the coast, as we've been talking about it here, doesn't that translate into water that flows inland, and not just in places like Morehead City, inlets and bays, but doesn't that affect those that are maybe in the half of South Carolina, North Carolina, that are also low?
Yeah, since I've been in North Carolina, I've been through, I think I counted something like 5 hurricanes. The worst for us was Hurricane Florence, but probably the worst one for the entire state was Hurricane Matthew. And Hurricane Matthew really didn't do much to our coastline, but it just wreaked havoc inland. in the mostly along the rivers and the low-lying areas there. So it's not just the coast that climate change is affecting. It's really almost every place. You take a look at Hurricane Harvey and the effects that it had on Texas. So it's certainly something that we are aware of. We certainly are not climate change deniers. We think we have to mitigate the situation. As a matter of fact, the Business Alliance Protecting the Atlantic Coast, of which I'm the president, we are absolutely steadfast against any offshore oil drilling for a lot of reasons. We don't really need it. So we're well aware, and it's not just the coast.
Todd, do you get the sense that the folks in the inland communities along the waterways, and not just along waterways, but around that same area of dominant influence, have ownership of this problem that starts at the coast and comes in?
Most certainly. We work with a lot of farmers on the coastal plain, and they're well aware of what's going on, and actually have been ahead of the curve in terms of looking for innovative ways to upgrade their infrastructure to deal with ditches that flow backwards now that were constructed centuries ago. And so saltwater encroachment all over, particularly northeastern North Carolina, is a major issue. And the fact that drainage that was put there centuries ago is just not functioning the way it used to. And water, we have Lake Mattamuskeet, which is a crown jewel of wildlife refuges on the Atlantic Flyway for the East Coast, that is in jeopardy because it doesn't function the way it did historically due to higher sea levels, and it's really causing impacts to farmers, to the bird population, and flooding residents. But I mean, look at these severe storms that Oren was talking about. I mean, Hugo, which was a couple of decades ago, punched all the way into Charlotte. Fran, caused havoc in the triangle area of our state, and these aren't just coastal issues anymore. They're having widespread impacts, not only with flooding, but wind and other devastating impacts. Florence was probably one of the most expensive storms we've ever experienced, and we're still struggling to recover from that. Its impacts compounded with what we're going through now. Villages like Ocracoke that got hit last year with Dorian, are reeling. The community there is in real trouble. It has not recovered.
So Oren, let me ask you the billion-dollar question. Whose job is it to save the beach?
Well, it depends on your view of this, of course. I don't think, first of all, the beach doesn't need salvation. It's just concerned with the beach. And I mean, beaches will always be here. As sea level rises, there'll always be a beach. It may not have the same dune size that we have now, but so nature doesn't need any help. So we're really talking about who's going to save the buildings back, basically what it boils down to. And in my view, retreat from the shoreline is absolutely inevitable. Maybe.
How far would you retreat?
Pardon me?
I'm sorry. How far would you retreat?
Oh, well, that depends on the individual situation. But I would think if you're actually going to retreat and move buildings back or rebuild on the mainland, that you would choose an elevation that would be within, like we think maybe by 2100 the sea level will have risen 3 or 4 feet. I think 4 feet is probably a good guess, and that's what it is right now, of course. And so you want to be well above what a 4 foot sea level rise will do. So there's many questions here. For example, can we move a building across the bridges without the bridge collapsing? I mean, these are simple engineering questions that haven't been answered yet. And then the cost and the insurance problems and so forth. We see some real problems coming up already. I just the other day saw flooded in Front Street in Beaufort to my shock. That was a king tide, and king tides, which are the highest high tides that we've always had, but because of the sea level rise that's occurred already, the highest high tides are higher by a foot or sometimes as much as 2 feet. And so there's the evidence that we are getting in problem. You can also see all the dead trees along the coast as another line of evidence of the indication of intrusion of salt water.
Well, Laura, there is no place that's probably more acute in this debate about balancing development, personal homes, businesses that are on the water than the Battery in Charleston, of course, and those multi-million-dollar homes, but also Sullivan's Island, Seabrook, Colleton County, Edisto, et cetera, et cetera. All of these places, as Orrin just talked about, king tides, you're feeling it there because of the low country. So how does that debate play out? Who is winning the debate? Who should win the debate?
Well, it's definitely a debate. I don't know that I would say that there are winners and losers in that debate right now, but it's ongoing and it's important and it's urgent for all the reasons that you mentioned, and so did Orrin. You know, our city just invested, and we all participated, many of us participated in a process called the Dutch Dialogues, where we brought experts from the Netherlands to study our city, study different parts, different areas of our city, including the downtown Battery area, the West Ashley area, different parts of the city that are experiencing these issues in different ways. And, you know, the Dutch have been living with water for 300 years, and they've gotten pretty good at it. And they have a lot of engineering solutions, and they're not all hard engineering ideas. They're things like living shorelines and how to, and retreat, how to build, where to build, those kinds of practices that will make our city more resilient as we experience rising sea levels and more frequent storms.
Mm-hmm. Todd, how's the Coastal Federation in North Carolina facilitate this same dialogue?
Well, we've been pursuing a lot of what we term as nature-based strategies to try to deal with threats to our communities, and so everything from wetland restoration. There's some major initiatives. We're particularly on working lands where wetlands are being restored. We have a project right now with Department of Agriculture that involves 8,000 acres of wetland restoration in coastal North Carolina. But that's going to provide more space for water when these events come, and it's in many respects is a retreat. I mean, we're giving up the more marginal properties that particularly farmers have attempted to farm in the past, to give them more space, and the astute farmers are figuring out this is a way to get help with their infrastructure, so that it actually provides more pollution control and helps protect the remaining productive land, at least for another few generations. So, I think that, as Laura mentioned, the living shoreline strategies, the wetland restoration, looking at how we retrofit our communities so that they have the capability to function from a hydrologic sense more naturally. In the past, we always tried to shed the water as quickly as possible in the way we developed land. I think we've learned, that low impact development practices are such that you really need to keep the landscape functional from a water standpoint if you want to have any hope of controlling flooding and some of these long-term impacts.
Orrin, you're going to have the last question on this because we're running out of time. We have about a minute left, and to that point, instead of beach renourishment, is the answer found in wetland management or other strategies internal to the land? Is that the place to go?
As good as wetland management is, it's the fundamental thing is what the islands themselves, the front side, is going to do. There's no question in my mind that ultimately retreating from the shoreline will happen, must happen. And we could plan accordingly, even doing things like a friend of mine did on Topsail Island. He built a house that you put a big truck underneath and drive away with it. That's possible to do. There are many creative things are waiting to be done here.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, thank you all. You know, I don't know that we'll ever answer the question about whose job it is to save the beaches, Professor Pilkey, because as you said, the beaches don't need saving, but the debate around what we just talked about today, inland water flows, high tides, king tides, coastal development will always be close and near and dear to all the Carolinians' hearts just because of the nature of the beaches, and we love our beaches. But thank you for joining us. Professor Pilkey, thank you for joining us. Laura down in Charleston, thank you. We've been thrilled to have you on this dialogue, as well as Todd Miller. Todd, thanks for joining us. And of course, not to be last or least, Tom Keyes. Tom, thank you. Until next week, I'm Chris William. We hope you stay safe and you learn a new way of living here. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by High Point University, Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, Barings, Grant Thornton, Sonoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you.